Yes. So welcome everyone. And I think it's really, really great to see so many people turn up on a Friday at 7 p.m., which is officially the start of a weekend. But I think all of us are somehow and somewhere connected to this issue, and that's why we've decided to come here. So I won't spend too much time introducing what we are doing today, but just a little bit of introduction. And needless to say that this is about PMPML. This is about our public transport system. This is about the public bus system in the city. And just that fact alone, I think attracts a lot of discussion, a lot of attention from different stakeholders in the city. And highest priority among those are civil society organizations, also citizens groups, and sometimes decision makers, also media. So this is an issue which I think has always been in the spotlight somewhere or the other, but somehow when it comes to changes on ground, we have been struggling with making the public bus system a successful, efficient system for the city, which works for the city. Today, we are going to be looking at a very sort of a niche part of the PMPML system. And as much as I say it is a niche part and it is a small part of the thing, but there is no way you can look at it without looking at the PMPML system itself. So I'm actually admitting people in between. So yeah. So when we are talking about PMPML, and today we are going to be talking about wayfinding in particular. And I think many people might have heard this term for the first time, and just the word itself is self-explanatory. What do you mean by wayfinding? It's basically the fact that when someone decides to take a bus, what goes into that decision, how is that decision made, and after that decision is made, what happens? How do you actually find your way around the public transport system in Pune or in any other city for that matter? And that is what we are going to be discussing today. The precursor for this discussion is actually a study which is being done by Madhushri, and she has been actually behind this whole webinar and behind this whole study. And she'll be presenting her study to us, in which she has studied a few people who are using the bus for the first time ever in their life and finding out what their experience is like and the very first time that they decide to use the bus. And then we are going to delve into other issues in terms of bus services, that how is it that this first time experience actually affects the way they act, whether they choose to take the bus again or not, whether they decide, oh, the bus system is not for me. What is it that goes on into the decision-making process of actually having a person use a bus? And why is this whole discussion going on? Why are we focusing on people who are using the bus for the first time at all? I think the only one word answer or the two-word answer to this is that coveted modal share or modal shift that we are all looking for in a city like Pune. I think when you go through this webinar and when you go through this whole session, when Madhushri presents her study, I want all of you to actually just think of the fact that in 2018, the modal share of public bus system or public transport systems in the city was at 19%. So 19% of the trips made in the city were by public bus system, whereas I think around 25 or around 30% were by two-wheelers and 13 by cars. So what would our city look like if this 19% of public transport share, modal share, can go up to 30% or 35% or 50%? And in the end, I think what all the things that we are talking about smart cities, we are talking about climate resilient cities, just the potential that this modal shift can bring about in how your city is looking in terms of cleaner air, in terms of lesser congestion, in terms of reducing your carbon footprint, all of these things are only to bring about this modal shift. So when you are watching today's session, I think let's keep that at the back of the mind, that all of this that we are doing is to get that much coveted modal shift. So yeah, with that very short introduction, I would like to introduce Madhushri first, and she'll be presenting her study in a small presentation. And then we'll delve into a discussion with our diverse panelists, and I'll introduce them a little bit later. So let me just quickly introduce Madhushri to all of you. So Parisar engages with a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders in different capacities over, so many years we've been doing that. And we have a lot of interns, we have a lot of volunteers, people who say we want to do something. And Madhushri was one of such people, and she was, the way she came into Parisar, and I think what was different about her was that she was very clear on what she wanted to do, and her core interest area was public transit systems. So that just helped, I think, shape this whole process much better, and it made the whole process much more interesting. So Madhushri is a recent economics graduate whose interest in transit systems began with her bachelor's thesis examining the working conditions of women conductors in PMPML. She started Bus Kara, an online campaign, after experiencing the poor condition of Pune's public transport firsthand. Through Bus Kara, she hopes to engage with citizens on issues related to urban mobility and also examine the impact of social structures such as gender, class, caste, and religion on mobility. She's also a Youth Transport Fellow of the cohort of 2023, awarded by the Clean Mobility Collective and UMI Fund. So with that, I invite Madhushri to actually present the study that she did and her own observations and understandings that she got from that. So Madhushri, I'm going to make you the host now.
All right.
Yes.
Thanks for that very nice introduction. Just give me a sec. I will share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen yet? No, you can't.
Not yet.
No?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, great. So Shweta has covered a lot of the basic points that I wanted to go over, but I will just briefly go over them again. Before I formally get into the presentation, I'd like to give a background into how this study came about. So Shweta and I were discussing how in some countries, getting used to public transport is just so easy. The buses come on time. And if they are delayed, which is natural, the delays are, updated on a map or a display board. There are maps and attendants to guide you if you're lost. And that is something that I haven't experienced in India yet. An example that really stuck with me was a friend of mine who's not from Pune tried to use PMPML. So he had used it once with me, but he tried using it alone for the second time. He stood at the stop for almost 40 minutes, but missed the bus. 1 minute, I'm just also going to admit participants. Okay, fun. He stood at the bus stop for almost 40 minutes, but missed the bus because there was no indication that the bus was going to arrive, and he couldn't read Marathi. Now, basically, he was at the right place at the right time, but still couldn't make his way to the destination. As a result, he decided he will take a cab and has continued to take a cab in Pune ever since. So by this, you can sort of understand the impact wayfinding can have. And like Shweta mentioned, wayfinding is basically the process of finding your way in a physical space. But for a new user, a transit system is as usable as its wayfinding system. So why is that? Another participant. I will stop 1 minute. So yeah, that is because people rely on a lot of cues while orienting themselves in a place. I want you to think about the last time you visited some place new. What did you do? Probably before you went to that place, you read about it beforehand, you looked at maps. When you were in that space, you probably looked for signs or street names. And if you got lost, you used Google Maps or spoke to people nearby. So now studies have shown a very strong connection between the use of public transit services and the first wayfinding experience of commuters. Our study did the same, but in the case of PMPML. This study is one of the few evaluations of the wayfinding experience of public transit services in India. So when we look at the pre-existing literature, we find that wayfinding, like I mentioned, is a multi-sensory experience. And by that, I don't just mean audio or visual cues. I also mean stuff like architecture, like how often we say things like, oh, you can come near the Patanjali store here, or, come near this monument. So when it comes to accessibility, the world is still catching up. But ideally, good wayfinding systems should also take into account people who may have issues with hearing or seeing. and address it with respective solutions such as audio announcements or a lot of time assistance by people in the place. In a context that is as diverse as India's, graphics and pictograms are also very necessary for catering to people with different literacy levels, or simply to people who don't speak or read a particular language, Marathi in this case. If you remember, I mentioned that my friend was very hesitant to use PMPML again. That is because not only can a bad experience have very severe material impacts for some people, like missing an exam, for example, or getting late to work, but it can also cause anxiety and embarrassment. Now, there are a few ways in which you can evaluate wayfinding systems, but for this study, we focused on a purely qualitative approach because it was more exploratory and we really wanted to understand the experience. For the methodology, we got 5 volunteers to try the bus for the first time. The task was to choose a starting point, a destination, and figure out how to do it without any help from me. I was accompanying them throughout the trip. So the trips included stuff like going home from college or going to a mall. And after that, I conducted an interview, which I analyzed. Now, the limitations was that the participants were from a socioeconomic background that allowed them to use other modes of transport. This is important because for many people, most people who use buses, they can't afford a rickshaw or a cab. So they have no option to take the bus regardless of their first experience. The sample size was also small. Now we come to the juicy part. If you have used buses in Pune, when you read these results, you'll be like, Bhapo, because they're very familiar. So there were significant barriers to making the trip. And the main one was the lack of quality information on PMPML's routes. Because PMPML still hasn't created a way for Google Maps to track the buses in real time, which involves sharing their data or actually tracking it in the first place. The information on maps can also be misleading. But it is not just information. There are deeper issues with PMPML infrastructure, like bus frequency, poor connectivity. In some cases, you can't even make out if there is a bus stop in that place. You just have to see that there are a few people standing there. So, oh, that must be a bus stop. In some areas, for example, when I used to go to college, the bus frequency is as low as one bus per 45 minutes. One of the participants in the studies could not complete his trip by bus and walked home. That was 3 kilometers route, even though it is a very frequently used route by office goers. So although the participants felt good after the trip, because taking a bus in Pune can feel very challenging for the first time, they were very stressed during the entire trip. When it comes to the participant needs, everyone wanted an app or a website with all the information in one place, better signboards and information both in English and Marathi. After using the bus for the first time, despite the cheap costs, it still wouldn't be their first choice of transport in Pune. The previous point I want to emphasize, because most people, their first choice of transport in Pune is not a bus. And so as people's income levels increase, which I think we will get into in the discussion, because of the bad experience, they will always aspire to move away from the bus system. So these are some interesting bits from the journeys, from the individual cases. When we asked participants what helped, some said that, because the announcement systems in buses were not working, the conductors had to shout the bus stops, and which the conductors do sometimes, but not always. In some cases, when the crowds are very less, the conductors even shout at individual passengers to get off. So this helped some passengers. And when we speak of obstacles, and connecting back to the shouting point, what happened was, with one of the participants, the bus was arriving at the bus stop, but instead of stopping there, it just slowed down. And she couldn't figure out that she had to get off. She only realized that she had to do it because the driver yelled at her, "Arey, why aren't you getting off?" And the bus actually stopped in the middle of the road. This also speaks to the overall experience. And we can't only blame the drivers, they have to be, nicer or whatever, because PMPML in general is also very, it doesn't treat its workers very well. So it sort of is understandable, their frustration, where it comes from. Another participant, due to a recent eye surgery, has trouble reading from afar. And so she missed a bus because she couldn't read what was written and had to wait for 20 minutes. But think about how many people who actually who are partially sighted or actually have full blindness. It must be very difficult for them to actually get to their destination. Now, conclusions. PMPML needs to invest more in building and maintaining being the key word. It's physical and digital infrastructure. This is a cyclical issue. An app without a good service is not much help, because what will an app do if your services are all over the place? Although most of the BRTS buses are equipped with audio announcement systems and LED boards to indicate bus stop names, none of them work. Lastly, it would be interesting to understand and analyze the wayfinding experience of first-time users on a larger scale with a diverse group of participants, and understand whether it significantly impacts the decision to reuse the bus system or not. There is also scope for researchers to conduct audits of what wayfinding tools already exist and how they can be improved using participatory methods to make them more accessible to people with different abilities or needs. And that is it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhushri. I think that was a really very precise and very interesting presentation. And with that, I think we are ready. We have enough material to get into the panel discussion. So I'll introduce the panelists, and then we'll go question by question to each person. And then in the end, if time permits, I think we'll have a few questions from the audience also. So we have three very diverse and eminent panelists today, and we also sort of put our heads together because we wanted to have people who can look at this issue from three very different perspectives. So our first panelist for the day is Yogesh Dandekar. He is the founder and design head at Sarg Design Studio in Pune. Sarg Design Studio is a multidisciplinary design services company focused on advising and consulting for experience design in mobility, transport, narrative environments. Yogesh, with a 24 years experience in multidisciplinary projects, is a practicing service designer and experienced product designer with keen interest in public interest design. Thank you, Yogesh, for joining us today. Our second panelist for the day is Tejas Pande. Tejas Pande. Just a second here. Tejas Pande leads strategic communications and design at Anamaya, the Tribal Health Collaborative. He's a cultural producer with a background in visual design and policy research. Tejas works on projects related to information design, urban policy and environmental research, visual cultures, development communications, and exploring the blurring boundaries between content shared on social media and consumers' perceptions of the truth. Our third and last panelist for today is Mr. Ranjit Gadgil, and he's the program director at Parisar. He has focused his energies on different aspects of urban transportation in the city with a broader understanding of the city's fabric and its livability at the core. He has been part of a lot of significant systemic changes in the city, like the making of the comprehensive bicycle plan for Pune's urban street design guidelines, junction design, formation of the non-motorized transport cell, and so on. He has equally been invested in other areas of work like road safety, air pollution, heritage conservation, and the governance ecosystem for all of these. I'd also like to mention that Parisar has also been running a public campaign for bus systems, not only in Pune, but other cities of Maharashtra, which do not have a bus system at all. And he has been heavily involved in this Lakho Pachas campaign that we've been doing for the past 2-3 years. So welcome all of you, and thank you so much for joining us. So my first question is to Yogesh, and it is related to this whole thing that people are perceiving PMPML in a certain way, and that is actually sort of deciding what they view it as, whether they decide to use it or not use it. What do you think wayfinding, and how do you think communication is an important part of what kind of perception people have about PMPML?
Oh, great. Thanks for the introduction, Shweta, and it's my pleasure to be on the panel with Tejas and Ranjit. Okay, to answer your first query, I think if you historically see the way bus transport evolved in our country, it is started as a service that the government said, okay, people are traveling, let's introduce some shared services which can ferry passengers from one place to other place. And of course, the bus system never came first. The city started growing, and they'd say, okay, these are the pockets we need to connect the station to the market to society, some other developing areas and areas. So it kind of organically evolved. But as the buses evolved, the way people look at buses always, because those time they used to connect 2 points. It will connect a station to a bus stand. It will connect the bus stand to a market, and it used to connect the housing society to some other area. So the perception was that I will get a bus from point A to point B, and if I don't get a bus from point A to point B, I don't have a bus. Okay, so that is the first perception that anybody who wants to use a bus. So if you ask anybody, would you use a bus? His first question is, oh, do I have a bus from my bus stop to the last bus stop? Right? That's the first question that he'll ask. And it'll never strike him that once the cities become complex, there is a network of routes. And that network of route never gets displayed, shown to anyone, right? And that is what has happened with the buses over a period of time. And they actually completely ignored, because they were feeling that we are just doing some social service. And okay, it's a bus system, more expenses are from the operations side. Let's just keep running it. If people want to use it, they will use it, or else it doesn't make any much of a difference. So it was never seen as a proactive, forthcoming service that it will actually bring a change and make the city's roads safer, better, less congested. So that angle of looking at the buses was not from the operation side. And in turn, people never created an image that it's a connected network and I can change a bus and go to my desired point. That also never happened. And the topic of this entire session, wayfinding, is actually extremely critical, because that we do it day-to-day basis whenever we travel. So I'll probably elaborate that in soon.
Yes, thank you so much, Yogesh. And to your point, I think just yesterday I was looking at the PMPML website, and they have this section called Journey Planner and coming soon. Manje, it's going to, I think they're still developing it. And in that section, they just have 2 drop downs. One is where is your start bus stop and where is your end bus stop. And when you go to those drop downs, it's like weird kinds of names, Kutli Tari Bhaji Mandai, Matta stand. And I'm like, I don't know my start point in terms of the bus stop name, and I don't know the start point and end point in terms of the bus stop name. So what you're saying just rings really perfectly ki network asल्याशिवाय, म्हणजे मला ते visually दिसल्याशिवाय, it becomes very difficult for me to avail those services or even know ki, okay, this is something I can use. So I think I really resonate with that thing.
So I'll just add one thing over here, that if you want to visualize a network, we should be able to showing the network as often as possible. So we recently cited one research paper from France, and we took that research paper as a base, and we also did a recent research in Pune here. The research paper in France actually found out what is the image of the city in people's mind. Like, for example, we have a lot of people on this Zoom meeting and the webinar. If everybody able to place themselves geographically into the environment, whether I'm on the east, on the west, or south, or the north, or whatever it is, that is not possible for many of the people unless you give them a map. And that has never happened through the bus system, right? So they couldn't visualize that bus system. And when we looked at the Paris paper, the conclusion of the Paris paper is they interviewed some 90 or 100 participants. 45% of them were not users of public transport. And their image of the city was based on the transit map of Paris, which is the metro map. Yeah. So imagine that a graphic which is consistently placed across so many locations creates an image of a city. So probably PMPML lost that chance of becoming an image of the city, which the underground in London has, the RATP in Paris has, the metro in Tokyo has, or the MTR in Hong Kong has.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, that paper was something that also stuck to me when the last time we spoke. Thank you so much. And so that brings me to the next question, which is for Tejas. Design, now at least there is a little more awareness about the fact that design is a very, very important element of any kind of service that you're providing. But even then, I would like you to elaborate on just how important the role of design is in terms of affecting behavior. And I'm saying behavior because even in Madhushri's whole study and presentation, there was a focus on what kind of emotions they felt. And that is very, very important. So I want you to elaborate a little bit more on, design and its impact on behavior. And of course, the design is about the entire city, but also I want you to focus a little bit on PMPML's design and whether there is any design element in the whole planning of PMPML.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. And I'm very happy to join everyone here, not just the panelists, but also people who are listening in, they're tuning in. I think what's really crucial to always keep in mind when we are making decisions about wayfinding systems is what are the decisions that people need to make, right? So sometimes if I'm well connected on a very busy road, I might still not want to take the bus because there's just that much heavier volume of traffic, or it makes sense. Maybe it works better during the daytime, not during the nighttime, because the street lights work or don't work. So there are lots of variables that are there, right? What is it that the information can account for? What can design account for, right? To make sure that the variables that they have some control over, they can account for that and say, okay, this is how our system works. You're welcome to make your decisions on the basis of the other parameters that we have zero control over. Footpath khandla, गिर जाएगा उसमें, like fine, whatever, but like that's not my problem. That's a PMC problem, right? So but at least I know if the footpath works, like if the footpath is good and if the bus stop is there in any shape or form. I'm not picky about danda lagaya, bada bus stop hai, bench hai, nahi hai, jhaad hai, like everything is fine, I'll take it all. But to say that the bus is going to show up with a reasonable degree of certainty, right? So I think like being able to make very fundamental decisions actually requires an almost like revolutionary level of clarity that can be worked upon by the service provider, definitely, which is PMPML here, but also commuters. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in learning from each other, which I think like one should sort of consider, okay, this is great. There are certain quirks in the system that you actually do get to learn from each other. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. Which is not to say that PMPML should not be working on getting their basics right? The other thing is that there is some degree of sort of certainty that comes in through design, right? So what Yogesh was talking about earlier, which is to say, okay, here's a map. It's a spider map or whatever, your linear, diagram banaya, very good, London. So buses sort of like begin to emulate that. I mean, bus service providers. And that has some sort of a positive impact on you, because to say, okay, well, in the chaos that is my daily life, at least I got this diagram that really helps me well, right? The crucial thing that we have to sort of always think about is that how do we strike a balance between sort of design compensating for bad information to begin with, and making sure that it provides a certain degree of some degree of certainty, right? To say, okay, well, this is where your bus stop is supposed to be. This is at this point your service is supposed to show up. Like, for example, I live in Bangalore, and BMTC has an app now which allows you to track after a decade and more of waiting and hoega nahi hoega, aa raha hai nahi aa raha hai. Like, there's been a lot of hambil ka nigel. Anyway, it's been a very arduous journey, but all of us commuters have stuck with it, and finally we have this app. There also it was very much sort of staggered, because only certain buses were being tracked at first. So for a few years, we could only find out if you were a Volvo bus rider or not, or, so, but anyway, now we are at a much better position. The thing is that sometimes I see that my bus is 59 minutes away, right? It's great for me to know. Just example, I mean, but it's not really helpful beyond a point, right? That kind of predictability also has its limitations, where it may or may not necessarily help you plan your trips, right? So those kinds of things. I mean, sorry, I hope I'm able to like drive a point here, which is to say that there's a very fine balance between the certainty that information brings, there's a certainty that design brings, and also there's a certain amount of like overcommitment that also happens through great design. There's always a possibility of that, right? And so for me as a commuter, I would imagine that the ability to decide comes from a good balance of both of these sort of poles. And good design ideally sits somewhere in between, right? Pune has that journey planner, great. Um, uh, is it screen readable? Nahi hai, but theek hai, like whatever. Route bata do, bahut ho gaya. Bangalore also used to have this database for the longest time, where they would have a list and they would have a map, and the list and the map would not match. And I'm like, but you're the same, like you're the same information provider. How does your list not correspond with your map? And it would be like a lovely, like I say, haath se draw kiya map going from one location to another. And but the thing is, when all fails in Bangalore, the wisdom is Majestic ला जा, तिकडनं पुढची बस मिळेल. The thing is, now these are sort of tricks that one learns to respond because you have to use the system, or because you make a choice to use the system. To say, well, the first part of the journey is bad, but the second part of the journey is good, so I'll just like suffer through it. It's fine. Bus thoda crowded रहेगा, but I don't care. I'll suffer through it, right? Like whatever that may be, I'll tolerate it. So there are lots of decisions that one makes when one gets onto a bus, and I think like that's something I think that's quite crucial to remember. That none of these bus systems are perfect, and it takes a lot to get them there. One app doesn't solve anything, one map doesn't solve anything, because ultimately what we are thinking, what we are working with is like a certain kind of messiness that's there in terms of information, source information from the service provider. So while I can wait and complain and cry and moan about the fact that PMPML may not have their act together, which no bus service provider like does well enough in the country, only means like, some people are better than others in some respects. But also as a commuter, what is it that one decides to do? Right? And I think like the commuter response in Bangalore, if I may, so sorry for quoting Bangalore so heavily, but having been a part of a lot of these things, to say ki, haan, chalo, we'll do a bus audit, and we would just like map a corridor's bus audit over and over again, and these are all commuter led, right? Which is to say that you become friends, you say ki, haan, chalo, let's pressurize BMTC to say, well, there's rusted nail here, can you please fix it, or whatever that may be. But the thing is, you create communities of commuters, and I think they're supremely important. I think it is important to not look at transport only as a service. There are cultures that begin to evolve around commuting, and I think they are supremely crucial. So while we clap for all the people who do bhajan every morning when they come from like Virar to Parel, let's also please remember that some like similar cultures also exist in our buses. The question is, are we willing to give them a chance and to say, okay, well, there's more to it than just me being able to get from point A to point B. Not to romanticize it unnecessarily, but I'm saying that there is a lot that goes on. And it's very easy to say, which especially in the case of Pune, because my God, people love to complain in that city about the buses there. Ki daridri PMT hai, daridri PMPML hai. Say, हाँ, वो ठीक है, but like, okay, move on. What I like, just get on a bus, move on. Ho gaya. So,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, sorry.
No. It's very interesting to see your train of thought, and I have like 4 or 5 things that I want to really point out over here. One is that the fact that you said that design alone, of course, can't solve, and I think this discussion we've had many times at the Parisar office ki हे सगळं आपण करू, पण त्यांनी बस तर वेळेवर द्यायला पाहिजे किंवा whatever it is. And you have also said the other part of the story which says that सगळंच PMPMLच्या डोक्यावर टाकून म्हणजे अगदीच यू आर डुईंग नथिंग असं पण नको करायला. सो आय थिंक व्हॉट युअर एसेन्शियली ॲडव्होकेटिंग इन मेनी वेज इज टू फाइंड अ मिडवे and not to aspire to be like 100 or 0, but kind of find out the sense or the rhythm in all the mess, seemingly the mess or chaotic situation that is there. And also to your point of, when you said that just making an app is not going to solve your problem, I think that's one thing that we came across a lot when this whole smart cities thing was going on, because they were trying to solve everything with just some technology fix, while all the basic things were not being addressed. So I think a lot of things that, clicked very much in terms of I think there are common threads in all the things that we do. And I think 3-4 points that I really could pick on. With that, I think I want to ask another question to Ranjit sir. And I think that is about, of course, as I said in the introduction, the most coveted modal shift. How do you see the role of a first-time bus user in bringing about this modal shift? Is there a role that this particular act of, like we felt it was very interesting to see people who have never used a bus before, who don't need to use the bus, who have the money to do everything else. But we just wanted to see what happens when they use the bus. And we found it, I personally think there's a lot of potential to actually bring about that shift. Ki ekdam apun bagha, and then let's just see, maybe you use it a little more than you used before, or maybe some trips of your private transport get reduced. So what do you think is that? Do you think there is potential in this idea at all, is what I want to ask you.
Yes, so I think, Shweta, we've been debating this ever since Madhushri came up with this project, and we've been looking at it and thinking about it. And I think, the modal shift will happen because of many things that have to happen. And it's not going to be one magic bullet. Yes, fares will matter. Bus connectivity will matter. The fact that buses aren't breaking down will matter. So there'll be a host of issues that will either convince people to use the bus or move away from it. We also have to sort of be aware of the fact, and Madhushri referred to it and gave me an opening when she said that somebody will talk about it. But as income levels will go up, even if you have a very good public bus system, people will not use it, or at least that's sort of the experience worldwide, that people will prefer a personal mode of transport for, again, a whole variety of reasons. It's not just aspirational, or I want to show off that I have a car. There's many other factors that go into it. And so while, and what we also discussed, I remember, it's an important point, that I think when you use the system for the first time, if you have a bad experience, chances of you using that system again will probably plummet, because you tried it, you didn't really like it, and then maybe others will sort of support that and say that, oh, you used the PMPM alone, it was never going to be good. And that all influences you to then quickly look at what others are doing. And what you find in a city like Pune is everybody's saying use a two-wheeler. So you kind of then write to your parents and say, ki PMPML chalta nahi, bus nahi chalta hai, I need a two-wheeler. And if it's possible, that's what you will start to sort of drift towards. On the other hand, if the bus experience is pretty good or decent, you might put off taking that decision for quite some time. You might say it works for me, maybe not everywhere, but I need to go to my college, or I need to go to a certain number of fixed places, and that seems to work. And I think, therefore, there is great value in PMPML trying to capture those first-time users. They're probably turning to the bus, unlike Madhushri's sample. These are people who may have genuine reasons to want to use a bus. There are visitors to the city, there are students, there are people who come from rural areas, and they may, and as they just said, they're probably not looking for something perfect. They're okay if the bus is a little crowded, if the bus is not right on time, they'll adjust. They're coming from backgrounds where they're able to adjust. They're not looking for perfection. And so even if they have a decent experience, I think there's a good chance that you will sort of hold on to them. And we also discussed this, sort of moving on from the question that you asked, is that, even people who, recently we did the same thing, and people who want to experience the bus again for some other reason, maybe your car's in the garage or something else has happened, and you say, well, maybe let me try the bus. And if that experience, so that's similar to a first-time user experience. You're not a first-time user, you've been in the city, perhaps your knowledge is a little bit better, Marathi. And so therefore you could also be one of those who's sort of reacquainting yourself with the system. And again, if that experience is not bad, You may decide, hey, this is not as bad as I thought it would be. Once in a while, I don't mind using the bus, or if I'm at the right location, at the right place, I'm not in a hurry, let me jump on the bus. Now, all of this will have a positive impact on that modal share or that modal shift. Because as the city keeps evolving, there'll be new challenges that will keep emerging. And if using the bus can be one of the things that you will think about when these situations arise, then perhaps the bus service would have played its role. And I'll pause there.
Yes, thank you so much. And yeah, I think we've had these discussions on and off that it's cyclical. If the service is better, there'll be more people. If there are more people, the service will be better. And I think it just goes on, but it has to start somewhere. And with that, I think I'm going to ask Tejas one more question. That is in terms of, I'm putting the spotlight back on PMPML now, and or any authority, that how far do you think that design as an element, or design and communication as a part of the entire process of planning of PMPML or the authorities, does it exist? What kind of a perception do they have? Design manje काय है? What is their perception? Does design have to be a part of everything that we plan? I mean, whatever experiences you've had in interacting with them, what do you feel about it?
So if I can answer it slightly differently, because I think it might respond to a comment that I read by Rima as well, right? Which was talking about centralization of, I don't know who's supposed to centralize. So I think that was a bit of clarification that I wanted. But in order to design, you need your raw material, right? And so which is why, like, I think it's very crucial to keep coming back to the question of the information part itself, right? How does information allow me to create a channel to actually create some sort of a relationship with the public service provider, right? As a commuter, I think that's the bit that I'm like truly interested in, because we've seen some really interesting responses to that. So Telegram groups, especially in the Bangalore region, because people are obsessed with these sort of solutions, and I think it's quite wonderful, right? Telegram groups that talk about it is our version of live tracking, which is very, very good. So there's a heavy population that commutes between, say, sort of Salem side, but especially Hosur to north of Bangalore, right? And all of these passenger commuter trains pass through the city. So it's a very strong regional network. So they started creating a sort of makeshift kind of icon system to say कि oh ही train जर असेल तर बदक वापरा, ये train रहेगा तो चाय का पतीला use करो, so all the emojis that they could find between that sort of corresponded to stations and trains that run, right? And all of us are on the group, like a few thousand people, and we trade information on a daily basis, which allows me to plan my journeys exactly well. It is a citizen-driven solution. And at some point, like that created a channel to where Southern Railway sort of was saying, oh, well, what can we do about this? Because this group got very popular. And I think like online sort of publications started covering it to say, oh, look, here's a wonderful like citizen-driven solution and all of that. The good thing was that it allowed people to understand that lack of information is not an excuse, which is why you can't actually you can't travel on public transport. Trains are crowded in the evening, but they are a very good way of like whatever. They are the most feasible way of traveling. So you sort of get on that train and you travel. Similar for buses, right? So for buses also, commuter groups have actually been very good at creating relationships with BMTC, creating relationships with BEST. That's how Chalo app eventually sort of came about, right? In part, at least. So I think these relationships are extremely important. And I don't really have a good sense of whether like Punekars are capable of doing that. You have to stop crying about PMPML constantly to actually get to saying, all right, fine, rone dhone ka mera aadha ghanta ho gaya. Now can we get down to work? Right? I think it's a good thing. I think we shouldn't be necessarily looking down upon these human relationships because they actually allow us to influence system design. So I think it's a slightly like way of answering your question, but I think then we can talk about whether your map works out. But if there is no healthy relationship, and I think that the question of identity that Yogesh brought up, I think was very important. But the thing is that, like, we constantly have to keep making sure that people keep taking the service. My relationship to Swargate bus stand, no matter how messed up it is, does matter, right? My love for Deccan Gymkhana bus terminal does matter a lot. Me feeling happy at whatever. Actually, I don't really have a relationship other than these two bus stops. But like whatever, Parvati is a bus stop, right? Like when the BRT did exist on Satara Road. I think it does matter a lot, right? Because very often, like sometimes, like that's a very sure indicator of people sort of coming back in. And that's also partly by design. It's well integrated into your life. It's well integrated into your everyday life, everyday activities. And I think those also begin to matter in terms of how people fit or accommodate public transport within your daily life. That becomes your daily routine, right? Thanks. I hope it answers your question.
It answers my question in a way I did not expect it to. So in a good, unexpected way. So thank you. But yeah, I understand what you mean in terms of, if it is a part of people's lives, then I mean, that can only happen when they use it more and more. And yeah, I mean, I think there are like a lot of threads over there and somebody needs to connect it. But yeah, a lot of interesting thoughts in there. I'm moving to Yogesh. With Yogesh, again, with the same question that I think I tried to put PMPML on the spotlight with Tejas, but Tejas is not ready to say anything about PMPML. So I'm going to talk to Yogesh now. And I know for a fact that Yogesh has worked with PMPML. And I'm sorry, I don't want people bashing PMPML, but I want to know, and I want people to know, that is PMPML doing anything, at least trying in its own respect to, make its communication better, or like Tejas is saying, citizens and PMPML need to have a good relationship, but of course that part needs to be mutual. And somehow up until now, I think we've suffered from the feeling that it's only us trying to get in touch with them and trying to do things. But I would ask Yogesh to shed more light on how his experience has been interacting with PMPML, and what kind of collaboration did they have before, I think a couple of years ago, when you did work with PMPML on communication design. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that question. And I think just to add to Tejas's point of view, I can speak about Bangalore as well, because I have extensively traveled in buses in Bangalore, and I have worked on the metro and the airport there. So I kind of understand the whole passenger system in Bangalore. And I was also a part of a civil society group which had convened, I think in 2010, to create a case to revive the rail links which exist in Bangalore. And that was a proposal that we had made. I was a part of that team, and I just got along, and we made a big proposal which was sent to the government, and now which we see is happening now. Anyway, so coming back to Pune, which is on the design part, I think how I see design getting involved into a system or things like this is, let us look at PMPML as a service, and let us look at a service which is delivering on a certain amount of operational systems, right? And that's one side of the coin. And the entire organization is tuned to work with their own operation systems. They have their schedules, they have their structures in which they identify buses, they plan routes. What they don't understand, or what they are not able to realize, that the buses on the other side of the coin are used by people who actually have no understanding of why these buses are the way they are, why these route numbers are the way they are, why I have to get into a bus of 42 which goes from Katras, and suddenly 101 comes in the same route which is going to Hinjawadi, right? So there is a certain way in which people are not able to understand it. So the gap that design actually plays a role is, design understands people's behavior. Design understands why people need to do things. As I think when we were talking, Shweta, earlier, that there are three things that people need to do, right? There is the basic necessity of traveling in a city from point A to point B. irrespective of whoever you are. You might be a courier person, you might be going to a movie theater, you might be daily commuting to work, you might be going to classes, or whatever it is, you're traveling from point A to point B. The point B, you don't know any information about it, or it's familiar, right? So you are perfectly fine, you have mapped the route. If it is not familiar, you will try to search for information. So what is your way to search for information? And that is where the bus systems have actually failed. They never looked at this opportunity that bus network can actually become the window to see the city, right? And that is what has happened, which I was saying earlier, that now nobody believes that London is a very organic city. They believe that London fits into a rectangular sheet like that, right? This is London Underground's map, which is on my mouse pad. So no, they feel that London is like this, but it's not that. So that is the second point, that they need to visualize where they want to go, and they will find tools to find the information, which road to take, where to turn, where to reach. And last is the mode of transport, right? What I will take, whether I will walk, cycle, bus, and a lot of stuff. These three things are people's requirements. And the bus system has to make sure that these three things are provided there, right? So the point number one, and of course, all these things, there is an underlying default, bottom of the pyramid thing, I should be comfortable doing this, right? And the comfort definition is very different for everybody, right? A person who cannot afford a car, for him, a bus is very comfortable. He will never complain. But a person who actually can afford a car, for him, bus is extremely uncomfortable, right? So we understand what people need, what their personas are. Bus system needs to know that these are the people who actually want this, and their information has to be translated so that these people get it in right way. And that is where design helps. Now, going ahead with the way I have been trying to involve. So I sometimes tell ki ek tab kela to work with PMPML. The first presentation that I made to PMPML was in December 2009, when, and after that I have probably met 12 CMDs, the managing directors so far, trying to convince them that this is the lowest hanging fruit in making your system user centric. Lowest hanging fruit, very low tech, very low cost. You already have the structure there. You just need to make a print. You need to make the information consistently delivered to the people. Trust me, the ridership will increase by 10 to 15%, right? If the bus ridership increases by 10 to 15%, you can surely say that the mode share is going from 19% to 25% very easily, right? Add to that AC buses, add to that, it's a comfortable ride. And the last thing that I have been trying to tell them is improve the interchanges. Wherever you have interchanges, and there are very unknown interchanges which people use, and I've seen them, I have myself used them. So all this way in which the system works, it has to be communicated to people. And that is what design. So the way I have been working is I have been advocating to improve information. Few successes that I got was, if you remember the bus boards from 2008 till 2012, they used to write both things, the origin and destination, because the conductors were lazy to change the board. So when you see the bus, whether it is coming from Katras and going to Manapa, or it is coming from Manapa and going to Katras, nobody had a clue. So I got a success there by saying, okay, you have two sides of the board, put one thing here and one thing here, and make sure that the conductors do that. Now they're happy. So there's only one name there, right? Something very small things that happened. And then I have, over a period of time, trying to convince them that for like any business, like there is a business which is running. Example, there is a product company which is making a product. I, being a product designer, work with a lot of companies which sell products outside. Now they have to take a huge effort to make it in such a way that users want it, right? Now that is what the system needs to do, and they understand the design. And that's why I'm trying to introduce design into the corporation, the PMPML system. So I pro bono went ahead and told them, let's start your design studio. And the whole idea is that we will come here, we will sit with your team, help you sort out the problems of communicating with people. How do you get the maps ready? How do you show the information? How do you improve the communication on the buses and all the stuff? So they told me some problems. They said, let's beautify Deccan. We said, okay, beautification is not the solution. We reorganized the buses and it was working very fine. So we introduced some maps in 2009 that was liked. Then we again did another prototype in 2022, May 2022, where we put up at 2-3 locations. So we have been kind of from our side trying to push them. And the whole idea of integrating this design studio within the PMPML structure is, it's a role that PMPML needs to build on its own. We need to build capacity, we need to train people, and we need to make sure that they are in a position to manage this. You can see this very clearly happening with all the tech stuff like ITMS or map apps and everything. What has happened? The ITMS system came, was implemented, the contract got over, and now nobody even knows how to handle that system. So nobody paid attention to build capacity within PMPML. So it's like you never taught them to fish. You just served them fish on the plate, right? And then after the fish was over, he couldn't know how do I fish for more. So that is what I thought that I should do as a part of the PMPML Design Studio. And my plan that I have been submitting for more than 2 years now is we will handle it for a year, build capacity, and hand over that entire team into PMPML, which will further roll it out. It's not in the interest of a company like me to kind of work continuously there. We can improvise many other things over a period of time, but that's the way we are working. Just to show you something, maybe we are kind of trying to install maps like this now. A map is now going to get installed just a day after. I think on Sunday we'll inaugurate that map on Powd Road. We're trying to work out some sort of a crowdfunding initiative to get these maps on place, because PMPML doesn't understand this. They are saying it's a big expense. They are ready to put in a lot of money into making an app or improving their website, but they don't look at this very many basic things. And it's not their fault unless and until you showed somebody that this phone was going to help you. People would not have come out and demanded phone, isn't it? Somebody understand that you need a device to be communicated and get connected and stay connected, and somebody created a device and now everybody feels that I want one. So make the information available, omnipresent. It is definitely an effort, it's a task, but once the system is set, it can be continuously monitored and managed, and that's what our aim is, to do it. So we are kind of doing that work in a way, however it happens. Probably this is a platform where I get to spread my message to people that if there is any company which you can introduce me for some sort of a CSR funding, we can change the image of Pune's bus system. Thanks.
Thank you, Yogesh. I think that was a lot of, I think you've put in a lot of efforts over the years to make the PMPML bus system a little more understandable, a little more usable. And I think we've talked a lot about apps, and as apps goes, I think the last question regarding that itself is to Ranjit sir, that PMPML also has been talking of having an app for the longest time. And very recently, I think we ourselves submitted a letter saying that, what is the status of this app? Is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? So that's one question, that how important is having an app? And I'm also saying this because we've also been at Parisar, we've also been conducting some workshops in different cities in Mumbai, Pune, and Nagpur, trying to understand from citizens that what if, when it comes to sustainable transport, specifically low carbon mobility, what would they like to focus on in their cities? And I think 1 or 2 cities have come up with the fact that they want more information, better information, and an app to know where their bus is. So clearly, whether it works or not, I think Tejas would argue about that app. We don't know whether it works, but of course, it's captured people's imagination for sure. So I want to ask Ranjit sir, whether the PMPML is going to have an app and what has been the status of it. And the second part related to it, that as Tejas rightly said, that, we have to stop complaining at some point. But are there really any other cities in India that are doing it better? Not the app part, but just the communication and the running of a bus transportation system part. Yeah, so 2 questions in one because we are already above 8. So yeah.
And so I'll try to answer them as succinctly as possible. Yes, I mean, I think it is important. I don't think that these are mutually exclusive. The work that Yogesh is trying to push is extremely important. It will cover a wider range of people. But apps is something that people are becoming familiar with. And when we order something, a cab or even something on Swiggy, we've become very used to being able to track things and know when something is going to show up at my place. And therefore, it is not surprising that a lot of people feel that this information would be very useful to them. We've always maintained to sort of support what Yogesh is saying, that PMPML will probably not have the capacity to manage even this system. And so to answer your second question in the same vein, what I've seen, I don't know about other systems in India. We've been hearing good things about the Chalo app in Mumbai, but my experience has been, unfortunately, in cities outside of Singapore, for instance. I noticed right away, to Yogesh's point, I don't know where I'm located in that city. It's a strange city from a geographical point of view. And yet it was particularly easy to use the bus simply because I had this device at my disposal. And what I noticed is that, or what I was told is that the information is simply broadcast by the bus service. They don't get into necessarily making the app. The data becomes available and let people who are tech savvy and how to monetize it. And there are several apps that you can download, and then people use the one that they like. Maybe some are better in Chinese, some are better in English, some give you more specific information. And that's probably the way that we would like to see this happen. We do see a lot of benefits from having this kind of information available. Tejas's point is well taken, that if I am simply told that the bus is 59 minutes away, it's not great. We are hoping this could also help spur commuters to say that, why is this 59 minutes away? You know, I mean, I need better than this. You can get that sense from having this app perhaps more clearly, and I'm saying perhaps. But to be fair, it will also help a commuter make another choice. If it's really 59 minutes away, maybe you don't want to wait and you want to take some other mode of transport. And I can't grudge that to that person. On the other hand, if you've been waiting there for 10 minutes and I'm always in that two minds, you know, should I wait for another 5 minutes? Should I wait for another 2 minutes? And I'm always worried. It happens to me. You decide, I don't want to wait any longer. You get into some other mode of transport. And sure enough, 2 minutes later, you see that bus coming from behind you. And so I think an app will definitely help a lot of people to plan their trips, even if it means not using the system for now, and hopefully eventually also being able to use the system or being able to time your arrival then. Maybe if you know it's 59 minutes later, maybe you complete a couple of tasks and then you show up at the bus stop because you know that this app is sort of giving you information that's reliable. And so we would want PMPML to continue to focus on services, operations, making sure your buses are running better, planning your routes better, and then sort of putting out this information and allowing other people to use it in ways that are more usable. And I think that's probably the way to go. And I'll end there. Hopefully we can still give people a little time to ask questions.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, thank you so much. So some people have, of course, typed in a few questions, but would somebody just like to ask them themselves and then also ask whom they want to ask to? So I think Pooja has a question. She has 2 questions, I think. Pooja, would you like to ask the questions and then whoever you want them to be answered by?
I don't mind asking the question, but I wouldn't know if who would like to take it. So it's open to the panelists to take it as per their thing. So one of the questions that I've been thinking about is, so there are a lot of bus stops that has been removed and the routes are no more existing. And a lot of lower income group or working class people are finding it really difficult to keep up with their work, and a lot of them have lost their jobs. And I'm not talking this from should put examples from here and there or some kahani kahi suni, but I have experienced while I'm talking to waste pickers, while I'm talking to the Dhunna Bhandechi bai, kiva anybody on the road who's sweeping the rasta, and I'm like, me kutna ithun, where are you going? And they say some far away places that they are walking back home, saying that there are no buses anymore for us. So yeah, how is it that from the work that we are doing as CSOs, helping PMPML to understand that they might have taken a decision without the consent of the public, but it is necessary to answer, they are answerable for these decisions, include the public, and how are they planning to get back to including these routes? So that was my first question. After this, if nobody else is in the queue, I will ask. Otherwise, I won't ask the second question.
Yes, thank you so much, Pooja. Does anybody want to volunteer for the answer? I think Yogesh wants to answer. Yes, please.
Yeah, Pooja, a very valid question. Yes, there are a lot of gaps. I think what needs to happen is it is extremely important that the civil society goes to PMPML and tells them that you are as important as a healthcare service in the city. The way you are making sure that there are small clinics, small government hospitals where you can come and get treatment and all the stuff. Bus system is also important as an extremely critical service for a lot of people. And once you start traveling, so I think there could be many different reasons why some routes are stopped and why some routes are probably continued and stuff like that. They range from political reasons to low ridership to some challenges in putting bus into that area. So I would not go into the operational challenges, but I think the solution is only to keep putting our requests across that, yes, there are people who are seeking this. And sometimes the particular class that you have identified, they don't have a platform to raise that, right? So if there is a platform created to raise that voice, maybe the way the app is being done, or maybe there's a WhatsApp group, or maybe if there's a, these people also don't use the phones the way we use phones, right? Their use of phones is also very different, right? So in a way, there have to be some very clever solutions that has to be built into some very basic systems, which will ensure that people know that there is a demand for it, right? So if a tech platform is built in a very basic feature phone, that yes, there is a demand. Like this, they scan the QR code. If you go to UK, there is a particular number on each bus stop, and you just have to take the number of the bus, put a space, and that code of the bus stop, and you send an SMS. It will immediately return you back saying when is the next bus coming, right? So if you put a QR code, or if you put some sort of a number where people just have to send an SMS that I need a bus from here to this place, people can do that. So the demand actually will be generated by people. Give them the means to create that demand, because the system does not understand. It does not have the capacity to listen. And that listening capacity is something that the civil society or tech people can enable.
Can I just jump in a little quick?
Yes, Madhushree.
I think what you mentioned, Pooja, that the issue of equity, accessibility, gender, and especially when we're talking about people from marginalized socioeconomic backgrounds, I feel like there is also, when we look at the bus system, I think we fail to acknowledge, I feel like a lot of people fail to acknowledge, and I think it has been covered in the discussion, that it's more than just getting from point A to point B, right? And I feel like the authorities also need to change that perception, that it is, for many people, it is a mode of, just surviving. And, it's something that because of the land use or because of how our cities are segregated based on a lot of social oppressive systems, people just have to live further from their work. For women, certain times of day are challenging. So I think getting that social perspective into the conversation is very important. And for that, I feel like more people need to acknowledge the class, caste, and gender and religion in India that plays into these things. That's my point.
Yes, thank you.
If
Ma.
Shweta allows, I can add a question, and if I'm not supposed to ask back to back, I will not do.
Is it okay if we take 2 questions and then if we have time? Yeah, cool. Thanks. So I think Aishwarya will ask her question next and then Rima can ask her question. Yeah. Aishwarya, are you there? I think there's an issue. Rima.
Aishwarya, you may be on mute, Aishwarya.
Acha, yeah.
She seems to be on mute.
Yeah. But I don't know whether she typed her question by any chance. Maybe not.
She is
but-
not able to unmute.
Oh, okay. Just a second.
Can the moderator do that?
I will. Yes. So I've asked her to unmute. I think she does not need my permission to unmute, but seems to be an issue. Meanwhile, Rima, would you like to go ahead with your question?
Yes, sure.
Yes.
I, just for a little bit of context, I live in Varze, and it's been now 6 years since I was in 11th, but I would go to Ferguson College taking the NDA gate bus. I mean, while coming back, I would take the NDA gate bus or whichever bus that comes towards Varze. And the frequency, I would say, is literally like 2 minutes, like every 2 minutes, or let's say every 5 minutes, there's a bus. But just because of the area, because a lot of daily wage workers, or in general, I think I mean, I don't know how to label this, but I would say daily wage workers live closer to this area. The buses are always crowded, and overall it creates a very I mean, it's so congested that it's like a bad commuter experience. And now that I have started working at a place, I am always like, oh, instead of the bus, I will take an auto. So based on the areas or whatever, how can this frequency problem with the demand problem be somehow solved, that irrespective of your economic status, you still feel like, let's go by the bus because it's convenient? I think it's a lot in one question.
Yeah,
I mean, this sort of points a little bit to the Lakh Ko Pachas campaign that we did.
Yeah.
And essentially we don't have enough buses, Rima. That's the fact underlying everything. We need a lot more buses. We have about 30 buses per lakh population, less than that actually. I think I'm being generous. And we've run this campaign, as Shweta pointed out, Lakh Ko Pachas, we need at least 50 buses per lakh population. So almost double the number of buses that we have right now. The person from London once told us that they have over 100 buses per lakh population. And that's in addition to the enormous metro system that they have. But of course, you can do better with what you have. You can do route rationalization. You can decide that you want to run more buses in certain areas, give greater connectivity. And so, it's and this sort of points to the earlier question of how do you generate demand? Who has the ability to have that demand? And Yogesh sort of said that, can you create platforms where people can demand these things? And it just struck me that when PMPML services were curtailed to the surrounding villages, there was a huge backlash. And I think it may have been because villages have a platform. They're more connected. They can just, raise that demand through their MLA, and they quickly got that message through that they want to be connected. And as someone pointed out, Madhushi said, it's not just transport. Their very existence depends on their connectivity to the city, because that's where they're traveling. But people within cities are sometimes disenfranchised, and this has been another big issue that people have been talking about, that once you come into an urban area, you somehow don't have access to decision makers the way you sometimes do when you're in peri-urban areas. So it's a whole lot of politics connected with it. But we really do need more buses. And I think that's one thing that we've been pushing, through the mist. Forget about route rationalization, forget about all these other things. Let's just get more buses. It's not, once you get to those number of buses, you can do more things. Bangalore has actually 60 buses per lakh population. And so they have the decent numbers, but it doesn't solve all your problems. But for cities like Pune, it's really just not enough buses.
Yeah, I think Tejas wants to add to this question.
Yes, if I may, very quickly. Ranjit, thank you for your response, because it ties in very neatly into what I wanted to say a little bit, which was that there was an experiment that was conducted for route rationalization in Bangalore that kind of failed because the socio-political reality sort of take precedence over technical efficiency, right? As SOPs for taking in like peri-urban villages into the expanding BBMP boundaries. BBMP is Bangalore's municipal corporation. One of the things that has always been promised is you will get a direct bus to Majestic bus stand, which is in the heart of the city, sort of, where all buses come, like all bus routes collide into Majestic, basically, right? So that's our like default sort of the heart of the city. For the metro also is the same. So now the thing is that like me as a Gram Panchayat can go and say, well, when this transaction was happening and we were incorporated into BBMP, you promised us that there would be a direct bus to Market and Majestic. Now you're saying rationalization, say you're going to only take me to one of the trunk roads where my person who has to travel that much more has to change a bus, then go and deal with the other people who already have crowded the bus. And I don't even get a seat. If I travel from my village on a Majestic bus, I am guaranteed a seat. The seat thing is very important for all sorts of people, right? Not getting a seat or getting a seat. But I think who is able to leverage on under what circumstances or on what basis, I think it does make a huge difference. Sometimes it's class, sometimes it's politics, but very often they are heavily at play, which is why something like route rationalization is not such a simple situation where it's like, oh, well, highway hai to extra route chalega, uske baad mein sara area ka, like, it doesn't work. Try and make, like, by making like no stop like a trunk feeder or whatever thing, right? Danga ho jayega. So it doesn't work, unfortunately.
Right.
I'll just add to one point that Rima made, and I would actually ask her that don't stop using the buses. Point number one, you may feel uncomfortable. I have traveled with carpenters, daily wage laborers for 11 years, and it's not bad. Point number one. Point number two is, if we want to create a socially equitable society, we will have to promote people who can think right, should promote use of shared resources. Because we know we can do it out of choice and we can tune the way we want to do it, right? But there are people who don't have a choice. That does not mean that we isolate ourselves from it. It's a little bit egalitarian thought, but I'm really happy that you're using it. Don't drop using it. Sometimes fine, but it's good.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, my point wasn't like, I didn't want to sound privileged where I was like, oh, I don't want to travel with them. But whenever I'm traveling from Varje to, let's say, FC Road, then it is never a problem because I'm almost like the first station, first stop or the second stop. So then it is not crowded when when I feel pretty comfortable going inside. But when it's the other way around, it's almost like you're hanging outside the bus half of the times. Then you'll just feel that maybe I can afford like 100 rupees rickshaw right now. So let's just take that.
Sometimes it's okay. Don't want to do it 100%, no compulsion, but keep that spirit alive.
Yes, sure.
Yes, and I think we'll take the last question now because we are already at 8:30 almost. So the last question, I think Aishwarya has some problem unmuting herself, but she's typed in a question. So she said that she was recently in Bhubaneswar and she found that the network maps were great, but she was also able to read the maps because of her technical background is what she feels. So she's asking, how do we ensure that these maps are read by people as intended to? And would this need to be paired with an awareness building or sensitization program in schools, resident welfare associations, EWS neighborhoods, and so on? So I think this is a question for Yogesh and Tejas.
Yeah.
Say something quickly before the. So, yeah. So to that question, one of the things that I think a lot of designers keep talking about, I don't know how it materializes, is participatory design. And if you follow Benga Walk, which is a great page, what they recently did was a bunch of bus stop audits, and it was led by the community. And because a lot of them couldn't, like, they weren't reading English, or sometimes they read Kannada, but they did not read Tamil. At least that is what I sensed from the person who did the audit. They worked with them to create iconographies for the audits, and they did multiple rounds of that to come to a common understanding. And I think a key here is for that participation to come so that you can understand needs of people at a very diverse and a large scale. You can't always cater to everyone, obviously, but by doing this, you at least cover most of your bases. But yeah, whoever wants to add.
Okay, I think I'll take a go here. I think I was involved in the first project that created structured wayfinding system for a large urban transport system in India, and that was the metro in Delhi. And we had no benchmarks, we had no references in India, we didn't know how people will react. And now whatever we did in Delhi now has become an kind of an untold, undocumented rule for how you do wayfinding within a metro system. To an extent that the metro systems don't need anything. They say, Delhi jaake dekh ke aao, just do it the way it's done, right? So it's made that simple. So people adapt. Second is, you must have heard a lot of hue and cry and public promotion about design thinking, right? And it brings me to the point that Madhushri was also saying, we had never given any information out, right? Let us first put information out in front of people for them to consume. And then we will need to be open to edit and modify it the way they want to use it, or the way they can understand it. We have not crossed that first step of even giving that information, right? So let us first do that. We will be doing it, and we have started doing it. People come back to me saying that this works, this does not work, we will update, because you can't create the perfect system for any public project in one go. And that is the one of the major reason I advocate the urban transport systems to have a experienced design professional or a designer into their organization, because these are systems are organic, they change, the cities change, people's demography changes, people's expectation changes, and you can't have the design as one-time feature when the system was designed. You need to continuously keep listening and implementing, which is why a design activity has to be inbuilt into the bus systems, into the transport systems. Even metros don't have, right? Metros don't listen to a lot of people what they say, they just implement, right? That is not the right thing to do. If you want to build a service, a good service, it also has to grow ears, right? And the ears will in turn tell the hand to change and modify what you are actually implementing. And this system can only deliver if you kind of, and design can play a role. I'm perfectly right in, and also very much acknowledge what Tejas was saying. Design can't solve everything. It cannot, but it can definitely be a good player to make sure that this translation from listening to action, we can play a role in it. And that is what I think everywhere it needs to be done. And just last point, I think I'll just answer. If you start using urban transport in India, has not become a culture. It has become a culture in Mumbai out of compulsion because you never had an option. But it has not become a culture. If you want to make it as a culture, start early. I have list of projects that I want to do with schools. I have list of projects that I want to do with young kids who are just venturing out. And I did an experiment with my own son and it has worked. So if it has worked with him, of course, he probably looks at me and maybe he is ready to take that pain and to go out, but not other kids. But yes, it helps. So, and it can be done. So if anybody wants projects to be done, I'm done. I can give you a whole lot of ideas to implement projects in schools.
Great. I think Tushar wants to say something at this point from the audience.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Tushar.
Had a thought about what Yogesh was explaining about, like suggesting about design thinking. It is actually widely misused terms. I also understand that. But my question is, if we are not following any process like empathizing, which is something like what I think Manushri or somebody who has done this research, she actually did that by accompanying people on their bus journeys and stuff like that to understand. So when we are not following any such process like design thinking initially, and we are just asking or just giving out some information to them, how will we ensure that what language are we using to convey that information in the first place? Because we have not empathized with these people properly, maybe. We'll say something in our language and that might not communicate. That's what my concern is.
Thanks a lot, Tushar, for that question. Maybe something that I did not mention, which came as a default to me, is you have to be first become a bus user first to empathize, and which I do. For last 14, 15 years, I have been constantly using buses, not just generally, everyday commuting for more than 50 kilometers. And that was my first-hand experiences that actually gave me this entire insight, right? And that is the first lesson in terms of empathizing. And recently we saw the CMD also getting into the bus when he came new and trying to talk to people, understand commuters' problems and stuff like that. And he was, of course, it was on the social media, and also he definitely has carried some insights back, right? So these insights can't be captured in one go and I can document and these are my insights, it can't happen. So that's why I said, when I say that they have to grow ears are to empathize, right? And hands will be action. And that is what, and we probably from design, we are in a position to do certain things in a right way, right? That's the whole empathizing part. It cannot be a person from US coming as a part of an NGO sitting here saying, I'll help you solve the bus problems. No, it can't happen. He has to be here. He has to be here and understand it. Thanks.
And he needs to understand Puneri words also. Otherwise, it won't work.
Yes, thank you, Tushar, for that question. And I think with that, we should end now because it's 8:30. Thank you so much, everybody, for, as I said, joining on a weekend. And I think it was a very fruitful discussion, a very interesting discussion. And of course, all of you will be getting a recording of this. And let's see when we can connect again regarding the topic, because it's a huge topic and there are a lot of things to be done. So hoping to see you all soon. And thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Give me, no, wait, no, bye. 1 minute.
Madhusri,
Sorry.
you want to say something?
30 seconds.
Yes.
About the community building. So Baskara, I will do some promotion and self-plugging. Baskara itself is a campaign that came from the idea that a lot of speakers touched upon, which is pressuring the government from citizen side. Obviously, we can't do the government's job for them, but so we have already started one of the audits in which Dhruv, who's in the meeting, was a part of it, and we will soon be releasing the results. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to contribute to the project, you can reach out to me. Also, if you have any questions from this session, feel free to email us so that I think we can keep this discussion going even after this call is over. That's all. Have a good day. Bye-bye.